She said it like she was telling them to pass the salt. Don't invite her. She ruins every holiday. I was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a tray of cookies, hearing my own daughter's voice slice through me like a dull blade. They didn't know I was home. Or maybe they did and didn't care. I'd come back early from the market because I forgot cinnamon for the pie, and when I stepped inside, I heard them in the living room. Emily, her brother Joseph, and his wife Dana, talking, planning, laughing, about Christmas, about not including me. I didn't make a sound, just stood there with that tray in my hands, hands that had packed their school lunches, mended their Halloween costumes, buttoned their coats when they were too small to do it themselves. She just hovers, Dana added, laughing a little too loudly. Asks questions, comments on everything. It's exhausting. You know she'll bring those weird little gifts again, Joseph chimed in. Like socks from the dollar store. Who even wants that? I don't want the kids picking up on her gloom either, Emily said, a sigh in her voice. Last year, she spent half the dinner talking about the flu she had in 1983. They all laughed. I stood still. In that moment, I didn't feel 75. I felt 5. Standing behind a door I wasn't meant to open, hearing things no child or mother should hear. I didn't cry. That would have been a luxury. I just placed the tray gently on the counter and walked upstairs to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed. My feet didn't touch the floor the way they used to. Somewhere over the years, I'd shrunk. Just a little. Just enough to be invisible, I suppose. I looked around the room, framed photos, handmade ornaments from when Emily was in 3rd grade, Joseph's little clay turkey from kindergarten, a crocheted angel I'd made one year when we couldn't afford a store-bought tree topper. I had been planning to host, as usual. Not because they asked, nobody ever asked, but because it's what I did. I was the glue, the house with the big wreath, the ham in the oven, the stocking for every name. Even Dana's dog had one. Apparently, that wasn't enough to make me wanted. I looked at my planner on the nightstand. The list was already there. Menu, grocery items, notes for gifts, candle placements. I'd started preparing the month before, just like always. Just like my mother did, and her mother before her. I didn't know how not to prepare. Didn't know how to sit still while the world dressed up in red and gold and left me behind. The house was quiet now. They must have left. Maybe they thought I'd be too confused to notice, old enough to be dismissed, too old to matter. But I was still me. Still Maybelle Richardson, born in 1948 to a mother who made soup from bones and bread from scratch. I knew how to hold my tongue, and I knew how to hold a grudge. But more than anything, I knew how to pay attention. They'd get their Christmas. Oh, yes. Just not the one they were expecting. I rose from the bed, slowly, the way you do when your knees remind you they've carried you long enough. I walked to the mirror, adjusted my cardigan, smoothed my hair. My reflection looked calm. Maybe even cold? They thought I ruined holidays? I smiled to myself. Let me show them what ruined really looks like. When Emily was little, she used to call Christmas the sparkle time. I remember her dragging a blanket across the living room floor, wearing her brother's old snow boots, and singing carols she half remembered. She believed in everything then. Santa, magic, me. Back then, we didn't have much. One year, Joseph got a second-hand fire truck with a missing ladder, and Emily cried because she thought Santa forgot to come. I spent that night stitching a red scarf from leftover yarn and told her it was a special gift only kind children received. She wore it every day for a year. There were no catered dinners, no photo backdrops, no imported cheeses on glass platters, just chipped plates and casseroles with too much salt. Laughter that came easy. My husband, Thomas, carving the turkey like it was an art form, even though we both knew his hands weren't as steady as they used to be. He'd wink at me across the table, that slow, knowing smile of his, the one that said, "We're tired, but we made it." Again. He's been gone 11 Christmases now. That first year without him, I couldn't bring myself to hang the stockings. I just sat on the couch while the radio played Silent Night, and I thought, they'll come. The kids will come and help. But they were busy. Work. Schedules. Weather. Always something. Eventually, I learned to do it all myself. And maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe I made it too easy for them to let go. I covered their absences with excuses, smiled through their silences, made the house look warm even when it felt cold. I didn't want them to feel guilty. I just wanted them to come back. But they didn't come back. Not really. And when they did, it was as guests. They brought wine I didn't recognize, talked about mortgage rates and plant-based diets, made jokes I didn't understand, and gave gifts that felt like obligations. Gift cards, candles with strange scents, scarves that looked like they'd been picked up in a rush at a store near the office. They loved to correct me gently. "No, Mom, it's pronounced quinoa." Or, "You shouldn't say that anymore. People find it offensive." I tried to keep up, but there was always something new to be wrong about. And yet, I kept setting the table. I kept buying the cranberries even though no one ate them. I kept playing the old records even though Joseph would switch to Bluetooth speakers. I kept asking them about their lives, even though they never asked about mine. When Dana miscarried, I sent flowers and called every day for a week. She never picked up. When Emily's husband left her, I offered to help with the girls, but she said they had a system already. When Joseph was laid off 2 years ago, I transferred $3,000 to his account without a word. He never thanked me. Maybe he thought it came from nowhere. But it came from me. All of it came from me. So when they sat in my living room, sipping coffee from my cups, on my couch, surrounded by my memories, and said I ruined holidays, I realized something. It wasn't just about Christmas. It never was. They didn't want me. Not really. They wanted what I gave them. The space, the food, the money, the reliability. They didn't want my presence. Just my presence. That night I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Not of groceries, not of gifts. A real list. What I've done, what I've given, what I've tolerated. Every check, every loan, every favor. Every skipped doctor's appointment so I could afford another birthday cake. Every time I'd said, "I'm fine," when I wasn't. It was a long list, and I wasn't angry. Not exactly. I was just finished. Done pretending not to notice. Done covering their absences with smiles. Done earning a seat at a table I built with my own hands. I folded the list and tucked it into the drawer next to the stove, the one where I keep the warranty papers and old receipts, just in case I needed reminding. In the morning, I took down the boxes from the attic, the ones labeled Xmas in thick black marker. I opened them one by one, touching ornaments wrapped in tissue paper, Thomas's tree topper angel, Emily's glitter star from 2nd grade, a ceramic gingerbread man missing one leg. They looked tired, all of them. Tired and loyal, like me. I packed them back up, taped the boxes shut. There would be no sparkle this year, at least not for them. I didn't turn on the radio that morning. Usually I'd let it play the classics: Bing Crosby, Ella Fitzgerald, sometimes that old Nat King Cole record. But today, I didn't need company. I needed quiet. Outside, the neighborhood was wrapped in lights. Every porch glowed. Some homes had those giant inflatable snowmen that looked more like distractions than decorations. The Sanders family across the street had gone full North Pole again. Reindeer on the roof. Fake snow on the bushes. Their grandchildren would be visiting soon. You could always tell by the extra cars and the sudden, joyful chaos. I pulled on my coat and stepped outside. The wind cut sharper than I expected, biting through the wool. But I didn't go back in. I walked. Past the Sanders house. Past the Newtons, who'd painted their door red just for the season. Past the house where Thomas and I used to park and watch the town's tree lighting when we couldn't afford to join the crowd. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed to feel the sidewalk under my feet. The rhythm of movement. I passed couples carrying paper bags filled with ribboned boxes. Children pulling at their parents' sleeves. Laughter drifted from a bakery. Cinnamon and clove in the air. No one saw me. Not really. At the corner, I stopped by the bench near the church. There was a plaque on it now. In loving memory of Margaret Fielding, who loved this town. Margaret had been my neighbor when the kids were little. She baked molasses cookies every year and slipped tiny envelopes into everyone's mailbox with $10 bills and handwritten notes. Nobody remembers that part. Just the cookies. I sat down, my knees protesting like they always do, and looked at the street. Cars passed. Bells rang. Somewhere a choir was rehearsing. I listened, not because it comforted me, but because it reminded me I was still here. "Merry almost Christmas," a voice said nearby. I turned. It was Nora. She lived 3 houses down, widowed young, no children. Spent most of her days gardening in silence, her face shaded by a wide straw hat, no matter the season. "Out for a walk?" she asked, easing down beside me. "Clearing the air," I said. She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. "They coming this year?" she asked after a pause. I didn't answer right away. Just stared at the Christmas wreath hanging on the church door across the street. "No," I said. "I don't think they are." Nora didn't offer sympathy, just sat there with me. It was a gift, that silence. Not awkward, not pitying, just present. When I stood to leave, she touched my sleeve. "If you ever want to come by," she said, "I make a decent shepherd's pie." I smiled. "Thank you." When I got home, the house felt different, less like mine, like it was waiting for someone who wouldn't come. I made tea, sat at the table, looked at the small ceramic village I usually displayed on the sideboard this time of year. The church with the tiny steeple, the bakery with a yellow light inside, the miniature people skating in a circle on a mirrored pond. I didn't put it up this year. Instead, I opened the drawer under the phone and pulled out the little ledger I used to track bills. Inside, folded between the pages, were notes I'd written to myself over the years. Grocery lists, reminders. One caught my eye. Christmas, ham, sweet potatoes, Emily's nut allergy, Joseph hates green beans, Dana gluten-free now. I stared at the handwriting. My own, but foreign. A woman who bent and folded to everyone's needs. A woman who learned everyone's preferences, but whose own favorite pie, lemon meringue, hadn't been on the table in years. I closed the book. The next morning, I pulled out another list. Not written in pen this time, but forming slowly in my head. A list of what I'd given. without being asked, without being thanked. The mortgage payment after Joseph lost his job. The down payment on Emily's first house. The 3 years of private preschool for the twins. The dentist bills. The car repairs. The wedding deposit they couldn't cover. I remembered sitting in that bank office, signing wire transfers, writing checks, always smiling, always saying, "Of course, sweetheart, that's what family is for." And maybe it is. But family is supposed to be more than a transaction. That night, I slept without setting an alarm. I let the sun wake me, just as it did before the years began piling on top of me like snow on a roof. I lay there for a long time, watching the shadows move across the ceiling, and I thought, they've made their decision. Now I'll make mine. The ledger was older than the wallpaper in the guest room. Its corners were soft, the cover curled at the edges, like an old leaf left too long in a book. I hadn't meant to keep it this long, but there it was, my life in numbers. I pulled it from the shelf behind the pantry door where I kept the things no one asked about. The faded recipes, Thomas's funeral papers, a few cards the children sent in years when they remembered. I brought it to the kitchen table and sat down slowly, tea cooling beside me, pencil in hand. It was time to look. Not vaguely, not in passing, but really look. The first entry was from 1993, a $20 check for Emily's ballet shoes. I remembered how she'd cried when the pink satin got scuffed. She said she wasn't ready to perform. I told her real dancers always had worn shoes. She won a ribbon that year. I still have it in a drawer. Then Joseph's orthodontics, $4,200, spread across 4 entries. He used to complain about the braces, said they made him talk like he had marbles in his mouth. But he smiled so wide in his graduation photo. I flipped through more pages. College application fees, dorm room bedding, Emily's emergency appendectomy when the insurance only covered part, a plane ticket for Dana's mother when she broke her hip and couldn't fly alone, a summer camp Joseph couldn't afford for his daughters, but they really needed something to look forward to. Each line was written in my hand, precise, small, as though if I made the numbers neat enough, they wouldn't hurt. I totaled 1 page, then another. By the third, the sum had passed $60,000, and that wasn't counting the things that had no receipt. The casseroles, the driving, the staying up with sick children, the babysitting when the sitter didn't show, the sitting alone on holidays when someone had a last-minute change of plans. I turned the last page, blank, waiting. I didn't add my name to any of it. That struck me. Not once in 30 years had I written down what I needed, what I missed, what I gave up. I rose from the table and opened the cabinet above the fridge. It took effort. I had to stretch, and my shoulder groaned in protest. But I got the tin. Inside it was a small envelope, the emergency stash. I hadn't touched it since Thomas died. A few hundred in 20s, in case of what, I wasn't sure. I took out 3 bills and tucked them into my coat pocket. Then I walked to the hall closet, pulled out the small gray safe from under a pile of scarves, and dialed the code. It opened with a soft click. Inside were the bank statements, the investment summaries, the letter from my financial advisor suggesting, "We diversify now that your portfolio has grown." It had grown, all right. Not from risk, from saving, from careful choices, from years of making do, from wearing old shoes and reusing wrapping paper. That money was meant for something, for someone. I thought, for most of my life, that someone was them. But I was starting to doubt that now. I pulled out the statements, set them beside the ledger, looked at the numbers. I had enough, more than enough. Enough to stop giving away parts of myself just to feel needed. Enough to make a different choice. The phone rang. I didn't answer it. I was tired of answering, of being the one who always picked up. Instead, I picked up the pencil and started a new page. What I keep. My house, my stories, my patience, my name. What I no longer owe. Forgiveness to those who never ask. Excuses for those who forget me. Seats at tables where I'm only tolerated. I underlined the last line twice. Then I closed the ledger, placed it back on the table, and went to make myself dinner. Just for me. No substitutions. No gluten-free. No adjustments. Just a warm bowl of lentil stew, heavy on the garlic, the way I like it. As it simmered, I stood at the window, watching lights flicker on across the neighborhood. In the warmth of the kitchen, with the scent of onions and thyme rising into the air, I felt something unfamiliar. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of being whole, not useful, not accommodating. Whole. Tomorrow, I'd go to the bank. Tonight, I'd eat. And I wouldn't clean up right away. Let the dishes sit. Let something, for once, be only mine. The bank opened at 9, but I was there by 8:45. I stood outside with my gloved hands in my coat pockets, watching the reflection of traffic in the wide front windows. Frost still edged the glass in lace patterns, the kind of cold that stung a little, even through wool. I was the only one waiting. A young man in a navy blazer unlocked the door at exactly 9. He smiled, polite but distant, the way young professionals do when they assume you're just another pensioner coming in to ask about your balance. "Good morning," he said. "Can I help you?" "I'd like to speak with the account manager," I replied. He hesitated, then gestured toward a row of leather chairs near the windows. "Of course, if you'll just have a seat. Someone will be right with you." I sat. The bank had changed in the past few years. Sleeker now, less human. No more tellers behind thick glass, no more deposit slips on the counter. Just screens and sleek fixtures and chairs that looked nice but didn't offer much comfort. A few minutes later, a woman in her 50s approached. Crisp blouse, smart haircut, a calm kind of competence in her face. I liked her immediately. "Mrs. Richardson?" "I'm Helen Montgomery. I believe you've worked with my colleague Ron, but he's on vacation this week. I'll be happy to assist." I followed her into a private office. Glass walls, discreet blinds, a framed landscape on the far wall. She gestured to a chair across from her desk and waited until we were both seated before folding her hands neatly. "What can I help you with today?" I took a breath. "I'd like to cancel all scheduled transfers and payments connected to the Richardson Family Trust." Her eyebrows lifted, just a hair. "All of them?" "Yes. Effective immediately." She nodded, tapping her keyboard. "May I ask why?" "Just for record keeping." "No one's counting anymore," I said evenly. "But if you need a reason, consider it a reallocation of trust." Helen didn't flinch. "Understood." She worked in silence for a few minutes, eyes scanning the monitor. I watched her reflection in the glass behind her, the movement of fingers and focus. "You have 17 active recurring transfers," she said at last. "Mortgage support for Joseph Richardson, tuition assistance for Natalie Richardson, credit card payments for Emily Jenkins, a vehicle lease in your name, registered to Dana Richardson, and several quarterly gifts labeled as family support." I nodded. "Cancel them all. There may be some pending withdrawals for this month's cycle," she added. "I'm aware. I'll absorb the difference." She paused. Would you like to redirect those funds elsewhere? A new account? Or perhaps we can schedule a meeting to update your investment goals. I considered. Yes, I said finally. I'd like to create a separate account in the name of Nora Walker. She blinked. I'm sorry? Nora Walker, I repeated. She lives 3 doors down from me. I want to set up a small annual distribution in her name. Nothing fancy. Just enough for someone who always remembered to wave. Helen looked at me for a long moment. Not pitying, not patronizing, just seeing. I'll draft the paperwork. While she typed, I glanced around the room. A framed certificate on the wall. A plant that looked too green to be real. A snow globe on her desk. Glass dome. Tiny cabin. Evergreen trees inside. Someone must have given it to her. It looked personal, not corporate. You know, I said softly, I used to think money was a kind of love. Helen looked up. Not the greedy kind. Just the kind that keeps the lights on, puts food on the table, sends kids to school. But lately I've realized it's only love if it's given freely, without the expectation that you'll be tolerated in return. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. 10 minutes later, I signed 3 documents and confirmed with her assistant that all future access to the trust was revoked unless otherwise authorized. I initialed each page. My handwriting had grown shakier over the years, but every letter was still mine. When it was done, Helen handed me a folder. Everything is effective immediately, she said. If there's anything else, there is. She looked up. Do you have a notary on staff? Yes. I need a witness signature. I'll be updating my will next. She gave the faintest smile. Of course. When I stepped out of the bank, the sun had climbed a little higher. The air was still sharp, but the wind had softened. I walked down Main Street with the folder in my bag and my hands free. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where my money ended and where I began. The lawyer's office sat on the corner of Maple and Fifth, above a bakery that always smelled of butter and sugar. I'd walked past it 100 times, but hadn't been inside since Thomas and I signed our mortgage papers there almost 40 years ago. The same brass plate still hung by the door. Whitaker and Sons, attorneys at law. The and Sons had been polished so often it was nearly invisible now. I doubted there were any Sons left in the business. Inside, the reception area was warm, the air faintly sweet from the bakery below. A young woman with hair the color of coffee greeted me with a bright, professional smile. Good morning. Do you have an appointment? Yes, Mabel Richardson. 11 o'clock. Of course, Mrs. Richardson. Mr. Whitaker will be right with you. I sat down on the leather bench near the window. A soft hum of voices came from the inner offices. Papers shuffled. A printer clicked. The kind of quiet that feels safe, like someone is paying attention to details. When the door finally opened, I half expected a stranger. Instead, a familiar voice called my name. Mabel! My goodness, it's been what, 20 years? I looked up, and there he was. Arthur Whitaker. Not the father I remembered from the old days, but the son, Arthur Jr., apparently not so invisible after all. He was gray now, with kind eyes behind his glasses, and the same slight stoop Thomas used to get when he'd been reading too long. It's good to see you, I said, though I suppose people only come to lawyers for serious reasons. He chuckled. Usually, but sometimes for necessary ones. Come in. His office hadn't changed much. Bookshelves heavy with leather spines, a brass lamp on the desk, a single framed picture of his wife and 2 daughters. the kind of space that made you lower your voice without realizing it. "So," he said, easing into his chair, "what brings you in today?" I opened the folder from my bag, the one Helen from the bank had neatly labeled. "I need to make some changes to my estate plan." He took the folder, scanning the first few pages, nodding slowly. "You've already canceled the recurring transfers?" "Yes, all of them." "Good. That simplifies things." He looked up. "May I ask what prompted the change?" I hesitated, then said simply, "A conversation I wasn't meant to hear." He didn't pry, just nodded, the way men of a certain age do when they understand the shape of a wound without needing to see it. "All right," he said. "Tell me what you'd like to do." "I want to remove both of my children from the will. Completely." He blinked once, but not in judgment. "That's your right. Any alternate beneficiaries?" "Yes." I took out a small slip of paper with Nora's name and address. "I'd like to set up a trust in her name, for maintenance and care of the house, should anything happen to me. She's been a good neighbor, kind." He smiled faintly. "That's unusual, but not unwise." "And another trust," I added, "for a scholarship fund, in Thomas's name, for local students in trades, plumbing, carpentry, electrical work. Something useful. He always said the world needed more people who could fix things." Arthur's smile deepened. He was right. We discussed the logistics, the taxes, the paperwork. He explained every clause, every signature line. I listened carefully, asked questions when I needed to, and initialed each page with a steady hand. When we were done, he leaned back slightly. "You're thorough, Mabel. I appreciate that. After 75 years, you learn to read the fine print," I said. "It's where the truth usually hides." He chuckled softly. "Would you like me to notify your family of the changes, or keep it sealed until necessary?" "Keep it sealed," I said quickly. "Let them find out when it matters, if it ever does." He nodded. Understood. For a moment we sat in silence, the kind that carries weight but no discomfort. Then he said quietly, "You know, I handled my mother's estate after she passed. She'd left small handwritten notes tucked inside her documents, little messages to people she loved. Sometimes that's what they remember most." I thought about that. "Maybe I'll do the same," I said. "But I don't think they'd read mine." He didn't argue, just stood, extended his hand, and said, "You've made good decisions today. Sometimes protecting your peace is the kindest thing you can do for yourself." Outside, the air smelled of fresh bread and cold wind. I walked to the corner, stopped, and looked back at the sign above the door. Whitaker and Sons. The and Sons still barely visible, but there, holding on, like me. I crossed the street, clutching the folder under my arm, and thought of Thomas. He would have smiled at the idea of a trade scholarship. He'd say something like, "You can't build a house on apologies, Mabel." He was right. I wasn't building anything new. I was reclaiming what had always been mine. The house was quieter than it had ever been, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt clean, cleared out, like someone had finally opened the windows and let the stale air go. I didn't take the Christmas boxes down from the attic. They stayed right where they were, taped shut, tucked in the corner like sleeping dogs. I didn't need the paper snowflakes or the plastic garland or the stockings with names stitched in red thread, names that no longer came through my door. Instead, I went to the market and bought exactly what I wanted. No cart full of kid-friendly sides, no gluten-free stuffing mix, no sugar-free pies, because Dana's trying to cut back. Just what I liked. What I'd stopped liking only because no one else wanted it. A small turkey. Not a whole bird, just a breast. Enough for a few meals and a proper sandwich the next day. A bag of real cranberries, not from a can. Sweet potatoes, fresh rosemary, and one firm lemon for the cake I hadn't made since Thomas passed. He'd always said it tasted like December, if December had sunlight in it. When I got home, I set the ingredients out on the counter like old friends returning after too long. No rush, no pressure. Just the slow, steady rhythm of a kitchen breathing again. I baked the cake first. Lemon zest and butter filled the house. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't hum. I just listened to the soft knock of the spoon against the bowl, the low hum of the oven, the wind brushing against the windows like fingers on a drum. I cooked for most of the day. Slowly. Without multitasking. Without interruption. The turkey came out golden, crisp at the edges. The cranberries burst with sugar and cinnamon. I didn't forget the salt in the potatoes. For once, I made the food exactly as I wanted. Around 4, I set the table for 3. Not 2. Not 1. 3. I laid out my favorite plates, the ones I never used because they were too nice and just for company. Company never came, but I was company enough. I placed 1 fork at each setting. 1 cloth napkin folded neatly, just like Thomas used to fold his handkerchiefs. I lit candles, not for show, for light, for warmth. At 5, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and opened the door. Nora stood there in a deep green coat, holding a foil-covered dish in both hands. "You really didn't have to bring anything," I said, stepping aside. She shook her head. "It's just scalloped potatoes. Nothing fancy." "They smell fancy." Behind her, a younger woman appeared, maybe 20, with a warm scarf wrapped too high on her neck and a shy smile. "This is my niece, Ray," Nora said. "She's visiting for the week." I offered her my hand. "Welcome." She took it. "Thank you for having me." Inside, the table looked smaller with people around it, but not in a bad way. It looked like it was doing what it was built for. We ate slowly, talked quietly. Nora told a story about working at the newspaper when she was 25. Ray asked if I'd always lived in this house. I said yes. Nearly 50 years. Through plaster cracks and new shingles, through children and funerals and birthdays where no one showed. We didn't talk about what I'd lost. They didn't ask about the children who weren't coming or the phone that hadn't rung. They just passed the salt, asked for seconds, complimented the lemon cake until I had to blink a few times just to keep the tears from slipping. It wasn't a grand evening, but it was real, and that was more than I'd had in years. After they left, with hugs and foil-covered leftovers, I stood in the doorway for a while, watching their silhouettes disappear into the night. The cold nipped at my cheeks, but I didn't mind. The stars were out. Inside, I rinsed the plates and let them dry on the rack. I folded the napkins, blew out the candles, sat down with a cup of tea and stared at the table one more time. 3 plates, 3 chairs. No performance, no pretense, just presence. That night, I slept without dreams. Not because there was nothing left to wish for, but because finally, I had nothing to dread. Christmas morning arrived with the softest light. It crept through the curtains like an old friend who knew not to knock too loudly, the kind of light that doesn't demand attention, but simply says, "I'm here." I lay in bed a little longer than usual, not because I was tired, but because there was no reason to rush, no pies to check, no linens to iron. No children coming through the door, stamping snow from their boots, cheeks pink from the cold. The house was quiet, not the heavy kind of silence that comes with disappointment, but the steady kind, like breathing. I got up slowly, wrapped my robe around me, and made my way to the kitchen. The counters were still clean from last night. A few dishes in the drying rack, the smell of lemon still faint in the air. I made coffee, real coffee, not the decaf I'd been told to drink by people who hadn't tasted joy in years. The phone didn't ring. I didn't expect it to. No text from Emily, no Merry Christmas from Joseph. Not even one of those mass messages with the dancing Santa or a photo of kids I hadn't seen in months. It was fine, because the absence no longer hurt. It simply confirmed. Confirmed what I'd heard in the living room that day. Confirmed what years of strained smiles and forgotten birthdays had already begun to whisper. They had made their choice long before I made mine. I took my coffee to the armchair by the front window. The same chair Thomas used to sit in, with the worn patch on the left arm where his elbow rested. The street outside was hushed. A few cars, a dog walker in a bright red coat. Somewhere, someone was burning firewood. It drifted through the air, mixing with the cold and memory. I didn't feel lonely. I felt light. There was a freedom in not hoping anymore. Not the bitter kind. Not resentment. Just the clear space left behind when expectations are set down for good. Like taking off a coat that had grown too heavy. I thought about all the years I had arranged Christmas like a stage play. Set the table, cast the roles, managed the cues, and waited in the wings, hoping to be noticed. This year, I hadn't performed. I'd lived. I picked up the small notebook I kept by the windowsill and wrote 3 lines. December 25th. No calls, no cards, no ache. Only peace. I underlined the last word gently, as if it might fly away. Later, I would walk to Nora's for a second slice of pie and a cup of cocoa. Ray had promised to teach me how to use that silly video chat app so I could talk to her when she went back to school. We'd laugh, I was sure. Nora would make too much food. Ray would eat too little. It would be imperfect and warm. And mine. My Christmas. My version. Not lesser. Not leftover. Different. The tree across the street twinkled faintly in the Sanders' front window. I imagined their grandchildren gathered around, tearing paper, shouting over one another. The kind of chaos I once thought I couldn't live without. But peace was its own kind of company. I sipped my coffee, closed the notebook, and smiled. Not for anyone watching, not for effect, just because I could. Outside, a single bird landed on the porch railing, feathers puffed against the cold. It stayed for a moment, then flew off, leaving nothing behind but the mark of its presence. And that, I thought, is enough. Joseph arrived first, just before noon, with Dana and the twins in tow. He was always early, something he prided himself on, though in recent years it had started to feel more like strategic positioning. Claim the best chair, scope the wine, start the narrative before anyone else arrived. Emily showed up next, arms full of carefully wrapped boxes, and her voice already 3 notches above pleasant. "No one put the cider on?" she asked, glancing around the kitchen. "Mom always started it by now." "Well," Dana said, unpacking a tray of stuffed mushrooms she'd picked up from that organic deli on Brighton. "Mom's not here." They all paused for a second. The room held it, just long enough for someone to speak. No one did. The twins ran off to the den, arguing about which movie to put on. Joseph poured himself a drink. "I guess we should..." Start without her, Emily muttered, busying herself with arranging napkins, like that would fill the gap. The dining room looked the same. Same table, same chairs. Same red runner with holly stitched into the edges. Same dusty wreath hung on the hutch. But the house didn't smell right. No cinnamon, no turkey, no lemon cake cooling on the counter. And no handwritten place cards in Mom's careful script. Well, at least the caterer's on their way, Dana said, peeking at her phone. Scheduled for 1 right on time. But 1 came and went. No knock. No smell of warm trays or clicking heels across the porch. At 1:15, Joseph tried the number listed in the confirmation email. It went straight to voicemail. That's strange, he said, checking the calendar. Are you sure the order went through? I confirmed it last week, Dana snapped. The same as every year, just like your mother used to. Okay, he muttered. Don't get defensive. Emily appeared in the doorway, a bottle of wine in one hand. Is the food here yet? Dana shook her head. Still waiting. Emily frowned. Did you pay up front? Of course. Well, actually, no. It was supposed to be covered through the usual account. Joseph glanced at his sister. You used the house account? Yes. Why wouldn't I? We've done that the last 3 years. Emily's expression shifted, a tightness behind her eyes. I thought Mom managed those charges. Well, yeah, but she set them up to run automatically, remember? After the thing with the florist that one year. Joseph looked down at his phone, then back at Dana. Maybe you should check the account again. She did. She tapped, scrolled, frowned, tapped again. I'm locked out, she said. What? It's saying I don't have access, that there's no authorized user on file. Emily's voice cut in, sharp. That doesn't make sense. I transferred the deposit for the hall rental last week. It went through. Joseph's eyes narrowed. From Mom's account? Of course. He reached into his coat, pulled out his phone, and opened his banking app. A long silence followed. Well? Dana asked. Joseph looked pale. The mortgage payment didn't clear, he said quietly. Emily laughed, short and humorless. What are you talking about? I set it to autopay, like always, from her account. But it bounced. Says authorization revoked. Dana dropped her phone onto the counter. Okay, someone needs to call her, now. No, Joseph said. Let's not overreact. Maybe it's a bank error. Emily shook her head. You don't revoke access by accident. They all stood still for a moment. The house, once warm and bustling on Christmas, felt hollow, like a stage set with no actors who knew their lines. The twins came into the kitchen, complaining about the TV remote. Nobody answered. I'll call her, Emily said, pulling out her phone. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way she always got when her plans started to crack. She put the phone to her ear. 1 ring, 2, then voicemail. Again. Joseph checked his. Same result. Maybe she's just taking a nap, Dana offered, weakly. In the middle of Christmas Day? Emily snapped. When she knows we're all... She stopped herself. Because they all knew. They hadn't invited her. Not this year. Not on purpose. And now the cider pot was cold. The dining table was missing its centerpiece. The food hadn't come. The accounts were blocked. And no one, not a single one of them, knew how to fix it. Or whether they even could. It was Natalie, Joseph's oldest, who figured it out first. 17, sharp-eyed and quiet in the way that meant she heard everything. She'd slipped upstairs after the conversation in the kitchen turned into bickering, claiming she had a headache. No one stopped her. No one ever did. She wasn't really trying to snoop. She was just looking for a charger. The one in the guest bedroom drawer, her grandmother's drawer, technically, was always there, tucked behind a book or a coaster. Except the drawer was empty now. Not a thing in it but a small envelope, half crumpled, barely peeking out from the corner. She pulled it free. On the front was a handwritten note in her grandmother's elegant looping cursive. Catering. Confirmation. Deposit receipt. Do not remove. Natalie opened it carefully, more out of curiosity than intent. Inside were two folded pieces of paper. One was a printout of a payment confirmation from 3 years ago. The other, a bank statement from that same December. Both bore Mabel's name. She frowned. The statement showed the charge. $2,200. To the same catering company that hadn't shown up today. She rifled through the drawer a bit more. Under a stack of old sewing patterns, she found more envelopes, labeled by year, 2019, 2020, 2021. Each one with receipts for food, flowers, wine, even the holiday cleaning service. Mabel had paid for all of it, not through the house account, not through some nebulous family fund, not as a technicality. Her, every year. Even when they rolled their eyes about the centerpiece. Even when they joked about how she insisted on certain dishes. Even when she was asked to stay out of the way. Natalie sat on the edge of the bed, holding the papers in her lap. She remembered things now. Little things. The way Grandma always handed over her card without being asked. The way her name never appeared on the invitations. The way no one ever really said thank you. At least not like they meant it. And then, this year, how they'd spoken about her like a problem, like noise, like clutter. Don't invite her. She ruins every holiday. Emily had said it so casually, as if they were talking about folding chairs or tinsel. Natalie pressed the papers flat and put them back in the envelope. She took a picture of it on her phone, just in case. Then she returned everything to the drawer and closed it gently. Downstairs, the mood had shifted. Emily was pacing the dining room with her phone in her hand. Dana sat rigid at the table, arms crossed, mouth tight. Joseph was on hold with someone, maybe the catering company, maybe the bank. Nobody was smiling. Natalie stood at the top of the stairs and watched them. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Say it? Wait. Would they even listen? Her dad barely looked up from his phone when she came down. "Where have you been?" "In Grandma's room," she said. "Looking for a charger." "Did you find one?" "No, just some receipts." He didn't ask what kind. She hesitated. "Did you know she paid for all this?" Joseph looked up then, confused. "What are you talking about?" Natalie reached into her back pocket and handed him the envelope she'd brought down with her. She'd taken only one, the latest one, the one labeled 2022. He unfolded the papers slowly. Read them again. Then he looked at her. "Where did you get this?" "In her drawer. She saved everything." Emily walked over. "What is it?" Joseph handed it to her without a word. She scanned the page, her mouth pressed into a hard line. "This can't be right," she murmured. "It is," Natalie said. "She paid for everything, every year." No one spoke. Dana stood up, took the papers, scanned them herself, then sat back down with a thud. "You mean," she said, "we never—" Joseph shook his head. "We thought it was just automatic." "From the house." Emily sat slowly. She never said anything. Natalie didn't mean to speak. The words came out without thinking. She probably didn't want to be embarrassed. Paying to be included. It hit the room like a dropped glass. Joseph closed his eyes. Emily looked away. Dana didn't move. And Natalie stood there, the only one still holding anything. A piece of truth they hadn't asked for. A small, quiet accounting of what love looked like when it wasn't returned. Joseph called first, then Emily, then Dana, from her own phone, thinking maybe Mabel would answer if it came from a different number. Each call went straight to voicemail. Not declined, just ignored. The kind of silence that was deliberate, not accidental. Maybe her phone's dead, Joseph said, though he didn't believe it. Emily sent a message. Hi, Mom. Just checking in. Hope you're okay. Call me when you can? 3 dots blinked for a second, then disappeared. No reply. It was the first time in years any of them had been on the outside looking in. The first time they'd sat with the weight of not knowing, how it felt to be excluded, overlooked, unheard. The irony didn't escape them. But none of them said it aloud. Natalie stayed quiet. She sat in the corner of the living room, her legs pulled up beneath her, watching them unravel. They weren't yelling, not yet. But the cracks were widening. Dana was pacing now, mumbling to herself. Emily kept checking the bank app, as if the numbers might suddenly change. Joseph scrolled through old emails looking for a clue, a trail, a sign of what they had missed. It was all there. They just hadn't looked. By evening, the catered meal was long forgotten. Dana reheated frozen appetizers in the microwave. No one ate much. The table was still set, but the candles remained unlit. She's never done this before, Emily said quietly. Not once. She always called, even when she was sick that year. Remember? She didn't even respond when the girls sent their drawings, Dana added. She always responded. Joseph rubbed his face, suddenly looking older than he had that morning. You don't think something's happened? No, Natalie said. They all turned to her. She's fine, she said simply. She's just done. What does that mean? Emily asked. Natalie looked down. It means she was listening. The silence that followed was worse than any argument. Emily finally stood and grabbed her coat. I'm going over there. Joseph looked up. What, now? Yes, right now. And say what? I don't know, she snapped. Something, anything. I just need to see her. Dana stood too. We can all go. No, Natalie said. Don't crowd her. She's our mother, Joseph said. Natalie met his eyes. Then why are you only realizing that today? Emily flinched like someone had slapped her, but she didn't argue. Outside, the wind picked up, tossing loose pine needles across the porch. The inflatable snowman down the street had deflated, slumped against a picket fence like he couldn't hold himself up anymore. They didn't go to Mabel's that night. Not because they didn't want to, but because, for the first time, they understood something she'd always known. You don't get to walk into someone's heart just because you remember where the door is, especially not if you were the one who closed it. It was Joseph who came, alone, no wife, no children, no casserole dish wrapped in foil. He parked at the curb just after 10 in the morning, sat in the car for nearly 5 minutes before he worked up the courage to get out. His hands were empty. He'd thought briefly about stopping for flowers or a pie, but it felt wrong, like trying to buy back time with something sweet. Mabel saw him through the window before he rang the bell. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just watched. She knew that walk, shoulders square but not sure, hands shoved too deep into his coat pockets. The way he used to approach her as a boy when he'd broken something, and wasn't sure how much she already knew. He stood on the porch for a few seconds, then knocked. One solid knock, then stepped back. She opened the door. No smile. Just Joseph. His eyes flicked over her face. She looked the same, and somehow entirely different. There was something pulled back in her, like a tide that had decided it would no longer reach the same shore. "Hi, Mom?" She nodded slightly, said nothing. "Can I come in?" A pause. Then she stepped aside. The house was warm, not dressed up. No garland, no stockings. Just the faint smell of coffee and lemon from the cake she'd made 2 days ago. The table was bare. The tree, unlit. He followed her into the kitchen. She gestured to a chair. He sat. "I didn't bring anything," he said after a long silence. "I didn't think it would help." She nodded. Another pause. "I didn't know," he said, voice low. "About the payments, the house, the catering, all of it. I thought—" He stopped himself. "No, I didn't think. That's the truth." Still, she said nothing. "I went through old emails," he continued. "Every Christmas you'd confirm the plans, and I never once asked if you were okay doing all of it. I assumed it was what you wanted." She looked at him then, steady and quiet. "Wanting them here didn't mean I wanted to pay for them." He winced, nodded. "I know. I set the table for people who didn't look me in the eye." He didn't argue. She folded her hands on the table. "I gave until it stopped feeling like giving. I see that now." Another silence. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said finally. "Not forgiveness, not a second chance. I just wanted you to know I understand. At least I'm starting to." Her eyes softened, just barely. "It's a hard thing to start late." "I know," he said, "but I'm here." She didn't say thank you. Didn't rush to pat his hand or say it's all water under the bridge. Instead, she poured him a cup of coffee, placed it in front of him, sat back down. "Sugar's in the bowl," she said. He stirred 2 spoons into the mug. He used to take 3, but he didn't want to seem indulgent now. "I read the note you wrote," he said, "to Natalie, the one in the ledger. She wasn't supposed to find it. She's glad she did." They sat for a while, the clock ticking gently above the stove. Somewhere outside, a bird called. The radiator clicked once and then settled again. "I missed you this year," he said. Mabel looked at her coffee. "No, you missed what I used to give you." He closed his eyes. "That too. I don't owe you anything anymore." "I know." "I'm not angry," she said, "but I'm not the woman you remember." He nodded. She stood, picked up her mug, walked it to the sink. "You can stay for a while if you like. I have soup on the stove. Nothing fancy." "I'd like that," he said quietly. She didn't smile, but she didn't say no. It was enough. For now. The soup was potato and leek, simple, unapologetic. The kind of meal that didn't try to impress, but stayed warm long after it was gone. Mabel ladled it into 2 bowls without asking if he was hungry. She placed a heel of bread on a plate between them, already sliced. They ate mostly in silence. Not awkward, not tense, just quiet. The way people do when there's too much between them for small talk, but no need to fill the space with noise. Joseph took a second spoonful, slower this time. "This is good," he said. She didn't reply, just took a sip of her own. He looked around the kitchen. Everything looked familiar and yet off. No wreath on the pantry door, no scented candles burning on the windowsill. The radio was off. The usual holiday hum missing. "I forgot what quiet feels like," he said. Still, she said nothing. "I don't mean that as a complaint." I know. A pause. He tore a piece of bread and dipped it into his soup. When did it start? He asked, not looking at her. The feeling that we weren't seeing you? She chewed slowly, swallowed. I'm not sure there was a moment. It was more like a slow fade, like watching your name wear off a mailbox. He nodded. I think we thought you were okay, that you liked things just the way they were. She set her spoon down gently. That was the story you needed, so I let you have it. He looked at her then, eyes full of something that might have been shame. And we never asked for the truth. You stopped visiting when there was no food on the table, she said, not bitter, just stating a fact. Stopped calling when the needs weren't yours. That tells me everything I didn't want to know. Joseph reached for his mug, realized it was empty, and set it back down. After Dad died, I think I expected you to hold everything together, like always. She raised her eyebrows slightly. Didn't stop to ask what it cost. No, he admitted. I didn't. She stood, took his empty bowl, carried it to the sink. Rinsed it. Let the water run. Joseph remained at the table, his hands folded, waiting, not expecting anything, but not ready to leave either. When she finally turned back, her expression was unreadable. But she sat again. I'm not angry with you, she said. But I've lost too much time to pretending. He nodded. You don't have to forgive me, he said. I'm not even sure I'd deserve it. I'm not looking to punish anyone, she said. I'm just done being erased. He looked down. The wood grain of the table was worn smooth near the edge. He remembered tracing it with a toy car as a boy, back when she used to hum while washing dishes, before everything got quiet for the wrong reasons. Do you think we can... He stopped, started again. Can we visit again sometime? You and me? No plans? No holidays? She didn't answer right away. Then, gently, you can visit, but you leave the hunger at the door. He met her eyes. I will. They sat for a few more minutes. The wind brushed the windows. A creak in the floor above reminded them the house still held its breath from time to time. Joseph stood slowly. I should let you rest. You didn't exhaust me, she said. That's something. He smiled, small, honest. Thanks for the soup. She didn't smile back, but she walked him to the door. Drive safe. He turned before stepping onto the porch. Mom? Yes? I see you now. She nodded. We'll see. Then she closed the door. Not hard, not soft, just enough. Emily came 3 days later, not on a holiday, not dressed up, just in jeans, a wool coat too thin for the weather, and that familiar, determined walk that always meant she'd made up her mind and no one was going to stop her. Mabel saw her from the kitchen window. She didn't go to meet her. She stayed by the sink, drying her hands slowly on a linen towel. Let the knock come. Let the pause follow. It did. 3 soft raps, then nothing. No doorbell, no calling out, just waiting. Mabel opened the door. Emily was holding a tin of tea, one of those fancy kinds, with a ribbon still clinging to the lid like she'd pulled it off last minute from a gift basket. She held it out like an apology. I didn't come to talk you into anything, she said. I just wanted to see you. Mabel looked at the tin, then at her daughter. Come in. It's cold. Emily stepped into the warmth like someone unsure of her place in it. Her eyes flicked across the hallway, the table, the quiet living room. Everything looked smaller now, or maybe clearer. They sat in the kitchen. No tea. Not yet. I didn't know Joseph had come, Emily said. Mabel said nothing. But when he came back, he looked different. Still silence. I think we thought we could just fix it, Emily said, voice catching a little. Send a text. Drop by. Say sorry. As if that could erase everything we didn't do. Mabel turned slightly toward her. Her face gave nothing away. You kept feeding us, Emily went on, and we kept forgetting to ask if you'd eaten. She laughed once, bitter and small. You know, I used to think you were stubborn, always doing things your way, refusing help. But maybe we never really offered it. Mabel folded her hands in her lap. Her fingers were still damp from the dishes. She didn't speak. But her silence wasn't cold. It was just full. Emily stared at the floor. I don't know how to come back from this. You don't, Mabel said, calm. You start somewhere else. Emily looked up. Can I? That's up to you, Mabel said. I've stopped starting for other people. Emily blinked hard, then nodded. She didn't cry, not quite. But her hands trembled slightly as she pushed the tea tin across the table. I didn't bring it for the gesture, she said. It's the kind you used to drink, the one with the little orange peels. I remembered that. That's something, I guess. Mabel looked at the tin. Her eyes softened just a little. I'll put the kettle on, she said. And that was that. Dana came the following Sunday. Not alone. She brought Ray with her, and a store-bought lemon tart no one had asked for. Her smile was wide, too wide. The kind worn by people who are used to smoothing over discomfort with cheer. We just wanted to drop in, she said brightly. Didn't want to stay long? Mabel didn't answer, just opened the door wider. They sat in the living room this time. Ray did most of the talking, safe things, kind things, school, classes, a new part-time job. Dana sat quieter than usual, picking at the edge of the tart box, then smoothing it again. Finally, she said, I'm sorry I used your house like a bank. It landed with more weight than she'd expected. Even Ray looked up. Dana kept going. I never thought of it that way. I assumed you wanted to help. Mabel tilted her head. Help is something you ask for, not something you take before it's offered. Dana's face went red. You're right. She stood. We should go. Mabel didn't stop her, but she said, as Dana reached the door, you can come back, but don't come needing. Dana nodded. I'll come ready. Days passed, then weeks. Small gestures. A letter from Emily in the mail, handwritten, just 2 pages. No demands, no flattery, just memories and truths. A voicemail from Joseph. I'm planting tomatoes this year. You always said I was terrible at it. Thought maybe you'd laugh at that. No reply from Mabel, but she smiled when she heard it. Another knock one Thursday. Dana again. No tart this time. Just a coat dusted with snow and a quiet, can I shovel your walk? Mabel pointed to the shovel by the door. Nothing else was said. Not then. But it was something. They had come not to be forgiven, not to be comforted, but to be seen by the woman they had spent years looking through. Mabel didn't open herself, not all the way, but she kept the door unlocked now. And that was a beginning. The snow had stopped sometime in the night. Mabel noticed it first by the light, the way it softened through the curtains, brighter, cleaner. She pulled them back and looked out across the yard. Everything was still, the kind of quiet that only fresh snow can bring. No footprints, no tire tracks, just white, undisturbed and honest. She made her tea slowly. The tin Emily had brought sat on the counter. She'd tried it once, just to see. It was still good. Not quite like she remembered, but maybe that was the point. She took her cup to the front room and sat in her chair by the window, the one that faced the street. A car passed now and then. A child with a red scarf trudged along the sidewalk. Life, moving around her, not through her, and for once that was enough. The phone rang at 10. She didn't answer it. Let the machine take it. Emily's voice came through. "Hi, Mom, just checking in. No pressure, just thinking of you." She let it play out. No message left, just the line going quiet. She didn't erase it, but she didn't call back either, not today. She had her own plans. By noon, she'd wrapped 3 small parcels in brown paper. Not gifts. Just things she'd set aside, simple, meaningful. A crocheted scarf she'd made years ago, a copy of Thomas's favorite book, a tin of cookies with a note that read, "For when the words run out." One for Nora, one for Ray, one for Natalie. She walked them to each doorstep herself, careful on the icy walk. She didn't ring, just left them gently, like a memory placed back where it belonged. By afternoon, she was back home, alone again, and full. Not in the way she used to be, surrounded by people, laughter, motion, but full in a quieter way. A steadiness inside her that no one could take now. She sat again by the window, not waiting, just watching. She thought of Thomas, thought of every year she'd spent pouring herself into meals, decorations, invisible labor that was always called love, but rarely named as sacrifice. And then she thought of this year, the one she reclaimed, the one she spent not performing but choosing. She hadn't won anything, and yet she had, because she had stopped giving herself away in pieces. She had stopped making herself small just to stay included, and that was victory enough. The mail came late. She heard the flap of the box, the crunch of the postman's boots. She didn't rush to get it. Whatever it was could wait. Instead, she folded the blanket over her lap, picked up her book, and read until the light faded. No performance, no spectacle, just a woman, whole, at peace, and still here. If this story touched something in you, share it. Somewhere, someone else is standing in the kitchen with a tray in their hands, hearing a truth they weren't meant to. And they need to know. It's not too late to begin again.